back to the show. We were just talking about the different ways that people maybe don't feel so well. And a lot of people may go to a doctor, they may go to a gym, they may change their diet, or as Paul mentioned, they may decide to change their house a little bit so that it's a healthier place to live. Well, comprehensive, I suppose, health is one thing, but there's also another part of your life, your financial life, that should also be incredibly comprehensive, and that is, I guess, really your financial plan and everything that comes with it. John Hugg joins us, attorney at law with Hugg & Associates, specializing in estate planning, business succession planning, and elder law, and speaks on all of these issues and in many seminars throughout the Seattle area. John, how are you?
Doing well, Ben. How are you?
I'm good. It's funny. These are these points of time that you maybe heard something 10 years ago or 12 years ago. Like, oh, you really should have these plans in place.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people go 10 or 12 years and they don't have them in place yet. And, then it becomes harder and harder, I think, to make any type of plan really comprehensive.
Right.
From your side of things, from an attorney and estate planning, why is it so important to have a plan be comprehensive? And I guess, what do you feel like a comprehensive plan includes?
Well, I think more and more as we move forward and whatnot, you need a comprehensive plan, maybe more than in the past. Before, and I think a lot of people still do this today, is they'll start maybe with their financial plan. They'll go see a financial advisor and say, tell me what I need to do to have retirement money so that I can get through retirement. And then they do that in a vacuum. And then maybe at the end of the process, the financial advisor will say, oh, by the way, do you have a will? Oh, no, we don't have that. Then you'll go off to the lawyer to ask about, well, what should I do with everything after I'm gone? But nobody, including, and certainly not the individual who's seeking the advice, is thinking, well, can the two concepts be put together and pulled together to enhance your retirement planning? And going forward, I think that is going to be much more prominent and prevalent in society because we're going to need to pull all those threads together and have a comprehensive plan so that we're not closing off avenues and options for the future, for benefits and for cash.
How does, you talked about, and I think most people do this, when it comes to a comprehensive plan, I mean, it's tough to get an estate attorney and a financial planner and your mortgage broker and your real estate agent and your insurance agent and maybe a credit advisor, because these all come together. It's tough to get them all maybe in a room unless you have beaucoup bucks and it's like, okay, we understand. We're here for you, How does somebody go about creating a comprehensive plan? Because most people are going to be required or asked to go from office to office to office to office.
Right.
And the one thing we've found in the mortgage business is that it's hard to carry the information you learned at place 1 to place 2 to place 3. It's almost like a game of telephone.
Right.
And because most people, if I give somebody mortgage advice, they're probably not going to remember everything we talked about or the lingo, and they may explain something wrong to the financial planner, who then maybe has a different opinion than the estate attorney. How do you bring this all together when you have so many different people involved?
Right. Well, that's certainly a practical problem that everybody is going to face. I think one way to address it certainly is to educate yourself with regard to the issues that are going to affect you. Educate yourself in advance, at least to some degree, so that you're asking the right questions and pick the right place to start. Now, personally, I think a very good place to start would be actually with the attorney. I'm not just saying that because I am an attorney, but I'm saying it because that is, because what you own and how you own and what you do with your assets has a significant effect on your future and your future retirement. And so if you start there and learn the rules as to how to handle your assets and how to pass your assets from between spouses and things like that, what you can and cannot do with regard to gifting and things like that, then you can go to a financial advisor and integrate them into the picture and say, okay, well, what does it mean if I buy an annuity? How is that going to, see, this is what I found out from the attorney. How will, having this annuity, dovetail with what I just found out from, the attorney, and then maybe put them together and have them work and
work together. Really is what, isn't, and that's a fair thing, I think, for people to ask, because I think as much as people can get educated, there's no way they're going to be educated enough. You might get some terms, but things are going to get lost in translation, especially if you think you know what terms mean. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you actually made this point, making plans in a vacuum. It's almost harder. I call it making plans, doing it in a silo, and it's almost harder to go from silo or vacuum, silo to silo to silo to silo. Right. You almost need to just grow your vacuum and bring everybody in. Do you think that having professionals talk to each other is a viable way to do that?
Well, I think if you have the right professionals, certainly. I mean, in terms of going back to the point of educating yourself, I think one important key is to understand the nature of what you're facing. And that's how you get to the point of asking the right questions and following up with the right materials and right sources of information. So
you really need to start with a shrink who can help you understand, or I guess a life coach or somebody who can help you understand what your issues are and what your plans are.
Well, I don't know that we're looking at what issues you have from a shrink standpoint. I think what I'm thinking of is what is one of the most prominent trends out there today, and how does that affect us? So one of the most prominent trends out there is the explosion with regard to longevity. We have a longevity boom. People are living longer. One of the fastest growing segments of our population is the 85 and over segment of population. And
so that in some ways isn't, that would be like the issue. The shrink doesn't have to tell you you're getting older.
You're getting older and you're going to live longer. These are things that we can start to see that you're going to live longer. And another positive tidbit, if you will, is that roughly 50% of all 65-year-olds today are going to make it to age 85 and older. And for younger generations, you and me and Heather, we
and
are...
Paul, he's
and
over
Paul
there too.
As well, too, yeah, absolutely. The odds of making it to 85 and older are even greater. So you're going to be aging, and you're going to have issues regarding getting older, and so that's the first thing that you have to think about in terms, and what are you going to do and how are you going to do that? If you're still retiring in your 60s or maybe your early 70s, you're still looking at 10, 15, 20 or more years of retirement without an income coming in from employment. So how are you going to pay for those things that you might need? Housing, medical, and other healthcare needs, and just paying for everyday components of life, because things will continue to go up in cost.
So when you start thinking about longevity as just for the sake of calling it an issue, something people are going to deal with, it's an obstacle, right? I mean, living longer and money not being, growing on trees is an obstacle.
Right. I mean, like with most anything, the good side of the coin is you're living longer and you're living a healthier.
The bad part is you can't afford it.
is you have to figure out how to afford it. That is the challenge, and you have to figure out how to afford it. And cash flow is really, I think, the key component. And a real simple example, you take a 70-year-old couple and combined, they're getting, say, $2,500 a month from Social Security. They're both retired. They're getting maybe $1,000 a month out of their IRA. And they've got everything paid off. You're fine, and they've got maybe $2,500 going out, so their net positive cash flow of $1,000. They can take that money and travel and dote on their grandkids and all that stuff, and everything is great. Now, one of the spouses develops Alzheimer's, or one of the spouses has a stroke, and all of a sudden you've got to pay thousands of dollars every month for in-home care, or you have to figure out how you're going to modify your home in order for you to be able to continue to utilize it safely and whatnot. Or you have to figure out how you're going to pay for care in an assisted living facility, and all of a sudden you've got $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 going out the door every month, with that same $3,500 coming in. And so now there is the problem right there. That is one of the issues. So starting with knowing and understanding that that's what you're looking at, and that's what you have to be planning for, then having an understanding of what your assets can be doing for you and how they work, and the ownership structure and everything, that will allow you to find out, well, okay, how can I utilize this stuff to derive more income and more benefits? And I mean, that's I think the key challenge for everybody.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me like, when you talked about if you can generate the cash flow, which, a lot of people can, some people can't. There's a lot of different avenues, whether it's pensions or Social Security or 401k withdrawals, whatever it may be. But then a lot of the, I guess, maximization, the way you would maximize the cash flow from some of these assets is really comes down to how you decide to own them.
In part, yeah. I mean, certainly within the asset class, so within your 401k or within your IRA, you can figure out how to, and this is where you would be working with your financial advisor to figure out, okay, well, what assets will produce me the greatest cash flow and be able to maintain the principal and get income from those assets. But then where the legal standpoint comes into it and comes into play and dovetails nicely is, okay, well, if I own these assets in a particular way, does that mean that we can't qualify for certain benefits? Medicaid is a benefit that people can qualify for that will help pay for long-term care, and that's a very important benefit. If you're a veteran, veterans benefits can also provide additional cash flow to cover those types of costs. But those are generally, concepts that you have to qualify for. They are means tested. And so if you don't qualify in terms of need, or you don't qualify in terms of resources, as in you have too many resources, you have a problem. And those avenues of additional income are now foreclosed to you unless you take some drastic steps.
John Hugg joins us with Hugg and Associates. John, we just have about a minute left, but you talk about these means tests, and I think what's really interesting, and you can clarify, but the fact that if you have money in one place versus another, right, and I don't know the asset classes necessarily, but if you have money in account A versus account B, that would disqualify you because you're just not putting it in the right account in some ways.
Well, to some degree. I mean, it's maybe a little bit. I mean, the accounts are one thing, but I think in terms of, for instance, a good example might be an IRA. If you have an IRA and your spouse is the beneficiary who's going to be receiving that income and being able to get withdrawals from the IRA, and you pass away, if the income continues to go to the spouse, that will generally be viewed as a resource to the spouse. The entire account value of the IRA would be viewed as a resource that would have to be spent down in order to meet the means test. If, on the other hand, you were to, say, leave that asset in trust for your spouse, and it's actually quite complex to make sure that you can both leave it in trust so that you'll qualify under a means test and also not lose the tax benefits that you get with an IRA. So it's a very complex little game that has to be balanced and whatnot. But that's one thing. Leaving the asset outright to an individual can create a problem in terms of receiving other benefits, whereas leaving it in trust, changing the beneficiary designation in that situation can be quite beneficial.
Well, yesterday we talked a little bit about how 33% of people would go about getting a mortgage at Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
And not that they don't sell mortgages at Walmart, but they're interested in that. And I think the exact complex situation you're talking about is the exact same reason people don't need to go on like a legal Zoom or something like that to get their will done. Because on the outside, and this is, I don't know if you heard us yesterday, but on the outside, it's easy to fill in boxes. You can always fill them in. It's if you're filling them in right. Mm-hmm. And I think that all the way through, you talked about education, but all the way through school, you take your test, you get some right, you get some wrong, but you always answer the question. You didn't want to leave them blank.
Right.
And in some ways that maybe carries over into adulthood where people just say, well, I'm not going to leave this one blank. I need to have an answer, but they don't really know what the answer is supposed to be.
Correct. And a lot of times, just really quickly, a lot of times the people who are giving that advice don't necessarily know and understand the ramifications of the advice they're giving. No offense to the big banks, but they actually engage in an awful lot of estate planning when you start filling out the cards that say payable on death and joint tenancy accounts and everything. Mm-hmm. You're actually engaging in a fair amount of estate planning, and neither you sitting there at that desk with your banker nor the banker frequently understands the full ramifications of what it means to do those things. So again, how you own these
the
assets.
escrow officer isn't even allowed to actually talk to you about it because they're supposed to be a neutral party.
Right.
John, we do have to go to break. Thanks so much. Just stick around for a few minutes with Paul, and we will continue the conversation. That is John Hugg with Hugg & Associates. I'm Ben Brash, and we'll be right back.